It started with a glance, a moment so fleeting, yet it set my world ablaze. His eyes locked with mine across the gym, and for the first time in years I felt seen. Not as a wife, not as a mother, just me. My name is Lisa. I'm 36 years old, married for 10 years to Mark, a man who once made my heart race but now felt like a distant memory. Mark worked long hours, providing for us, but somewhere along the way, we lost each other. Our conversations were brief, our touch mechanical, and our love stagnant. It was Mark's idea for me to join the gym. He thought it would help me feel better, maybe even reignite some spark in our relationship. I went along with it, not because I believed it would work, but because I had nothing left to lose. And that's where I met him. Jake. My gym instructor. 6 feet 5 inches of pure muscle. His presence was magnetic. He wasn't just strong. He carried himself with an air of confidence that drew everyone to him. But it was the way he looked at me, his smile lingering a second too long, that ignited something deep inside. At first it was innocent, small talk during sessions, his hand briefly touching mine as he corrected my form. But the way his fingers lingered sent shivers down my spine. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just imagining things. But deep down I knew better. One evening as I left the gym, Jake followed me out. "You're doing great, Lisa," he said, his voice smooth and low. "You're stronger than you think." The way he said my name made my stomach flip. From that moment, I started looking forward to my gym sessions, not for the workouts but for him. If you're drawn to stories that uncover the tangled webs of human desires, like and subscribe for more gripping tales. The gym quickly became my sanctuary, a place where I felt alive again, where I could forget about the monotony of my life. Jake's presence made every session exhilarating. His touch was always professional enough to avoid suspicion but personal enough to set my pulse racing. I began to crave it. It started small, lingering conversations after workouts, his voice dripping with compliments that made me blush. "You've got more determination than anyone else here," he'd say. Or, "You're stunning, Lisa. Do you know that?" Mark hadn't said anything like that to me in years. Then came the private sessions. "You're making great progress," Jake said one evening as I wiped sweat from my brow. "But if you really want to push yourself, we could do one-on-one training. Just you and me. I'll make sure you reach your goals." I hesitated. I knew the offer was dangerous, but my heart raced at the thought. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. The first session was intense, just the two of us in the quiet gym after hours. Jake pushed me harder than before, his hands guiding me, his voice encouraging me. But there was an electricity in the air, a tension we could no longer ignore. At the end of the session, as I grabbed my bag to leave, Jake stepped closer. "You're amazing, Lisa," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I hope you know that." I froze, my breath catching. He was standing so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Before I could stop myself, I whispered, "Thank you." And then it happened. Jake leaned in, his lips brushing against mine. For a moment, I pulled back, my mind screaming at me to stop. But the loneliness, the yearning, the fire he had ignited inside me overpowered every rational thought. I kissed him back. That night was the beginning of something I couldn't control. We started meeting more frequently, always under the guise of private training. Jake made me feel wanted, desired, like I was the only woman in the world. For the first time in years, I felt alive. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that it was just physical, just a way to escape the emptiness of my marriage. But with every stolen moment, I was digging myself deeper into a hole I couldn't climb out of. The lies started piling up. "Where were you?" Mark asked one evening when I came home late. "Extra cardio," I lied, forcing a smile. "I'm really committed to this." Mark didn't question me at first, but I could feel his eyes on me watching. The paranoia began to creep in, but it only added to the thrill. Sneaking around, the whispered phone calls, the quick glances across the gym. It was intoxicating. One evening, Jake and I found ourselves alone in his apartment. It wasn't planned, or at least that's what I told myself. But as the night unfolded, I realized there was no turning back. The guilt gnawed at me, but it was drowned out by the rush of being with him. Jake was everything Mark wasn't. Attentive, passionate, alive. But deep down I knew this couldn't last. If you've ever found yourself drawn to stories that explore the hidden corners of desire and betrayal, like and subscribe to stay tuned for what happens next. The house was quiet when I got home that evening. Too quiet. Mark was sitting on the couch, his phone in his hand, and a look on his face I couldn't quite place. My heart raced as I tried to read him, but his expression was unreadable. "Hey," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You're home early." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes piercing. "Yeah, I thought I'd surprise you." There was something about the way he said it that made my stomach twist. I forced a smile, clutching my gym bag tighter. "That's nice. I'm just going to shower." "Lisa," he said sharply, cutting me off. "Sit down." The air in the room grew heavy. I swallowed hard and obeyed, sinking into the chair across from him. My mind raced, trying to piece together what he might know. Mark held up his phone. "Who's Jake?" My blood ran cold. The world seemed to tilt, and for a moment I couldn't speak. "What are you talking about?" I managed to choke out, though my voice betrayed me. "Don't lie to me, Lisa." His voice was low, dangerous. I saw the messages. My chest tightened as panic set in. I thought I had been careful, deleting texts, hiding phone calls, and covering my tracks. But somewhere, somehow, I had slipped up. He's my trainer," I stammered. "That's all." Mark's laugh was bitter, almost cruel. "Your trainer? I can't stop thinking about you. Last night was incredible." "That doesn't sound like something you'd say to a trainer, Lisa." Tears welled up in my eyes as the weight of my lies came crashing down. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "It's not what you think." "Not what I think." Mark exploded, standing up and pacing the room. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" I couldn't answer. My voice failed me, and all I could do was sit there, shaking. "I trusted you," he continued, his voice breaking. "I've been working my ass off for this family for you, and this is how you repay me." "I didn't mean for this to happen," I said, my voice barely audible. "I was lonely, Mark. You were never here. I needed to feel something. And you couldn't talk to me about that," he shouted. "You had to run to some guy at the gym." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark sat back down, his head in his hands, and for the first time, I saw the pain I had caused. It was written all over his face, in the slump of his shoulders, in the way he refused to look at me. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't plan for this. It just happened." Mark looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. "You need to leave." "What?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You heard me," he said, his tone cold. "Pack your things and go. I can't look at you right now." The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to beg, to plead with him to forgive me, but I knew it was too late. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. As I packed a bag, the reality of what I had done began to sink in. I had destroyed my marriage, shattered the trust of the man who had loved me, and for what? A fleeting moment of passion? Before I walked out the door, I turned to Mark. "I'm sorry," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I never meant to hurt you." He didn't respond, and as I left, I realized that I might have lost him forever. If you've been captivated by this story of betrayal and heartbreak, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales that explore the raw complexities of human relationships. The motel room was small and cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of the home I had left behind. As I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the worn carpet beneath my feet, I couldn't help but wonder how everything had unraveled so quickly. Mark had always been my rock, the man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But now, all I could see was the pain in his eyes as he told me to leave. I'd hurt him in a way I never imagined possible. Jake had texted me a few times since that night, but I didn't respond. The thrill I once felt when I saw his name light up my phone was gone, replaced by a deep, gnawing guilt. He was never the solution to my problems, just a distraction. I had been foolish to think otherwise. A week passed before I finally worked up the courage to return to the house. I had called Mark earlier, and he agreed to let me come by to talk. Standing on the porch, I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I knocked. When Mark opened the door, he looked thinner, his face pale and drawn. He didn't say anything, just stepped aside to let me in. The silence between us was suffocating as I followed him to the living room. "I didn't think you'd come back," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to," I admitted, sitting across from him. Mark leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Why, Lisa? Why did you do it?" I took a deep breath, my hands trembling. "I don't know if I can explain it in a way that makes sense. I felt invisible, Mark. You were always working, always distracted, and I needed to feel like I mattered to someone. And you couldn't tell me that?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. "We could have worked on it, but instead you turned to him." "I know," I said, tears streaming down my face. "And I hate myself for it. I should have talked to you. I should have fought for us. But I was weak, and I made a terrible mistake." Mark shook his head, his expression a mix of anger and sadness. "You broke us, Lisa. You shattered everything we built together." "I know," I said again, my voice barely a whisper. "And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know how sorry I am. I love you, Mark. I never stopped loving you." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," he said. "But I also don't know if I'm ready to throw away 10 years of marriage." His words were a small glimmer of hope, but they were tempered by the reality of what I had done. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said. "Therapy, counseling, anything. I just want a chance to make things right." Mark looked at me for a long moment before nodding slowly. "We'll see," he said. "But it's going to take time, Lisa. A lot of time." I nodded, my chest tightening. "I understand. And I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." The road to rebuilding our marriage wasn't easy. Therapy sessions were raw and painful, forcing me to confront parts of myself I had tried to ignore. Mark struggled to trust me again, and there were days when I thought he never would. But slowly, we began to heal. I stopped going to the gym, cutting all ties with Jake. I couldn't erase what I had done, but I could make sure it never happened again. I focused on being honest, on rebuilding the connection Mark and I had lost. There are no guarantees in life, and I don't know what the future holds for us. But I do know one thing. I'll never take my marriage for granted again. If you've been moved by this story of love, betrayal, and redemption, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales that dive deep into the complexities of human relationships.